Welcome back to the Fly Media Podcast. I'm your host, as always, and today we have one of the pillars in aviation. He has been one of the spokespeople in aviation since he was a child. Today we've got Jamail Larkins. He soloed a powered aircraft in Canada at the age of 13, which had never been done by an American pilot because the FAA told him he was too young to do it himself here in the US. So he traveled across the border to get it done. When the bug bit him, it bit him hard. And from the time he was a teenager, he has been traveling this country, inspiring others to get into aviation, sharing his knowledge, his love for aviation. Like the sky is his backyard. So, Jamail, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Oh, so thanks for having me, man. I've been a huge fan for what you're doing, trying to get more people involved in the community and show them what aviation can do in their lives. So I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm honored. I have so many questions, so much I want to learn. Like you've literally made your life doing everything now that consumes all my thoughts. So thank you. Thank you
No
for being a
problem.
pillar in the community. Thank you for pushing safety. And thank you for being somebody who has spent their life in aviation trying to inspire others to fly. Because when you hear about aviation careers, most of the time, what people think is going to the airlines and flying, corporate or ATP, things of that nature. Rather, you've made the career on the back end, inspiring others to kind of get into GA and just showing the amazing opportunities that aviation has, whether it's being a pilot or, being a mechanic or all the different facets of the game. So thank you for that.
No problem. I mean, there's a huge aspect of the industry, like you mentioned, that most people don't even consider. When you think about aviation, everybody thinks about becoming a pilot. Occasionally, people think about becoming an air traffic controller or a mechanic, but you got so many other jobs outside of there. You got aeronautical engineers at aircraft manufacturers. You got everybody on the services side at airport operations, the Federal Aviation Administration, and so many other small businesses that help support the entire industry. So we've got millions of jobs that need to be fulfilled inside of this segment of the industry. And the more people we can get excited about this, the better off the entire industry is for everybody.
That's awesome. That is the truest thing. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that have to come together. And
Yeah.
like you said, all people see is what they interface with, right? We interface with pilots and flight attendants. You do see the line crew from time to time, but there's so much more behind the scenes that happens. The people that design these airplanes, the folks that say this rivet is only tested to, this amount of pressure. Therefore, the aircraft
Yeah.
can only travel this speed, X, Y, and Z. There's so many smart minds that go into it. So it's amazing. And the way that, you just said that has told me I need to interview some of these engineers and get them on the show to kind of show. I think that'd be
Absolutely.
amazing to show aviation from their point of view and the stresses they have watching a plane take off that, they designed.
I mean, when you even just think about, I just started flying, a couple of decades ago when I was in high school, basically. And I remember literally flying a Cessna 172 that had LoRaWAN inside of it as one of the primary navigation references systems inside of the airplane. Now, you can't really even find a new airplane that's not glass cockpit capable or comes out of the factory that way, which is absolutely insane. I remember when I first started flying in college, I got my first glass cockpit airplane, a Cirrus SR-20, and I was so stoked about that, just getting a chance to fly a glass cockpit airplane. And that was a Cirrus SR-20. It was the very first general aviation airplane with a glass cockpit installed from the original engine manufacturer, or original airframe manufacturer, excuse me, the OEM. And so just in, a 20-year time period, technology has changed drastically for this industry.
As technology gives us more opportunity and makes things, I guess it helps to lessen the workload of the pilot.
For sure.
The issue that happens is sometimes people take that as, well, I don't need to know how to do X because, the autopilot can do that, or the plane is capable of doing that. You need to remember that these things fail and we need to use them or think of them as a backup. I'm the one that needs to know how to fly this plane, and these things are my aids to help me out, not the other way around. I'm not a button pusher and autopilot operator. I'm a pilot.
Yeah, technology is definitely not meant to make pilots complacent. There's a saying that you don't pay airline pilots the salary that they receive now today. When things go well, you pay them for when things go wrong because you have to still have that human interface there to be able to solve the problem whenever you do have a major situation happen and you've got 200 people in the back. So that's the same kind of concept that we have to instill in all aspects of aviation, that technology is great, don't rely on it, be able to still maintain flight safely in any situation that you put yourself in without the potential of having the technology there to be able to save you.
Definitely, without a doubt. Throughout your time, you've seen so many changes in the types of airplanes, aircrafts, and I'm sure you've seen so many incidents and accidents, pop up in the field. And it's probably something you get asked about often, being that you're traveling the country talking about aviation. Recently, what have you seen, or in your mind, what has been the cause of some of the issues we've been having in aviation?
I mean, the still number one reason why we have issues or accidents inside of aviation is pilot error. However, that has been getting better. If you look at some of the recent statistics, like for example, AOPA just recently led an industry-wide kind of safety stand down where they're recommending to general aviation pilots to just take a moment and go through some of the recurrency type training that you can do online from your home, from your iPhone, whatever the case may be, just to refreshen up on everything from airspace to rules and regulations, everything that we need to be able to know that sometimes we might get a little bit complacent as pilots, to get that back in the forefront of our minds. But one of the main reasons for that is because the accident rate has been trending in the right direction. We're down to, if I remember correctly, like 0.68 per 100,000 flight hours that we're doing, which is, I think, slightly better than half of what it was about 20 years ago. So aviation is going in the right direction, despite what we might occasionally see in the news. The facts state that general aviation is getting safer. And as the aviation community, we need to do our part to continue that trend, and staying proficient, practicing, doing flight training are all keys to being able to make sure that everybody in this community can fly safely. We have lower insurance rates, and the FAA doesn't go out there and do something that's going to make it more restrictive for the entire community.
Exactly. What it only takes one pilot to make a bad decision to bring the stink down
Yes.
on all the rest of us. So
Yes.
definitely. Well, it's great to hear, and to hear the statistics that things are going in the right direction, even though currently, in news, all we're hearing about is the negativity in aviation, the accidents, the issues. Pilots are still becoming safer and we're getting better. So that is perfect.
Yeah, we got to look at the facts and not so much the emotion out there. And you have to be empathetic about what people feel, but we have to remind them about what actually is occurring from a statistical standpoint. And we're headed in the right direction with aviation and general aviation.
Perfect. Because to you and me, GA is everything.
Yeah,
GA is the
100%.
world. Definitely. So let's dive a little bit more into your story, and let's jump back to when you were 12 years old and you took that first Young Eagles flight. What were the emotions, or what was it that you remember was most memorable about that flight?
I mean, I had been wanting to fly for a long time. I literally would rush home from school and play Microsoft Flight Simulator for hours and hours, almost every single day. So when I got the chance to go for my very first flight with the Young Eagles program, I was extremely excited. There was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Wyman Fox in Augusta, Georgia, who I contacted, and he agreed to take me up for my very first flight with the Young Eagles program in a 1956 Cessna 172. And this was in 1996, so this is like a 40-year-old airplane. It wasn't in the greatest condition by any means, but it got us up into the air safely. I got the chance to fly over my house, my middle school at the time. I got the chance to put my hands on the controls of an airplane. And I remember just literally seeing my dog run in my backyard from a couple thousand feet above. I remember getting a chance to see clouds nearby us. It was just a completely different perspective of the world than I had ever had before. I had the chance to be inside of commercial airliners before a couple of times, but it never gave me the experience that I got when I was flying inside of a small airplane. And literally, I got hooked. That's the best way to describe it.
The bug bit you hard. That's awesome.
It did.
So from that experience and being 12 years old, you still at the time, even now, couldn't get your license until you were 17, right?
You can't solo inside of the U.S. and powered airplane until you're 16. So what basically happened was that was my one connection in aviation. I had never met a pilot that I was aware of because my family didn't know any pilots or no one had ever introduced themselves to me as a pilot. And Mr. Fox, when I went flying with him, I basically begged him to let me be a part of the Young Eagles program long term as a volunteer. I knew that they did flight rallies every single month,
Mm-hmm.
so I asked if I could volunteer at the local airport whenever they had them, help out with the registration forms, do whatever they needed on the ground to make the Young Eagle flight rallies go well. And he said yes. So every single time they had that, I would be at the local airport helping out in whatever capacity that they needed. And in exchange, whenever they had an empty seat, they would let me go flying with them from time to time. I built up a little bit of flight experience that way. And after a couple months of doing this, my parents saw that I was pretty serious about it. I don't come from a lot of money, but my parents could give me everything I ever needed in life. But the idea of like me being a kid that could ask the parents for an airplane in high school wasn't in the cards by any means. So what ended up happening was they gave me a budget that allowed me to fly a couple times a month. I did that. And by the time I got 13, turned 13, I was literally flying the airplane completely from start to finish by myself. But inside the United States, until you turn 16, I was going to have to pay for a flight instructor to go flying with me. And that was literally a third of every single hour of flight training costs for me was pay for this guy to sit in the right seat. And I figured that was too expensive of a babysitter, in my opinion. So I got the bright idea at 13 that, I could do this safely by myself. I don't need this babysitter. So I wrote the FAA letter at 13 asking if I could get an exemption to fly solo before my before my 16th birthday.
Wow. And how did that turn out?
Not the way I originally had planned, put it that way. They wrote me back a actually pretty nice letter that said we need more information before we make this decision. And the funny thing is, my parents didn't know that I had actually typed up this letter and sent it off to the FAA in DC. But the letter was really a polite denial. But being 13, I was naive or not smart enough to realize that it was a brush off. So I thought they really needed more information. So I flew with six different flight instructors, two designated flight examiners. All of them wrote letters to the FAA on my behalf saying that I could safely handle an airplane in solo flight. Some of them even said that I was close enough to be more of a private pilot than even like a student pilot level, and there shouldn't be a reason why the FAA shouldn't consider it. But I don't know if you remember around this time frame in 1997, there was a young girl by the name of Jessica DeBroff who had actually died in an airplane accident in Cheyenne, Wyoming. She was trying to set a record with her dad and her flight instructor to become the youngest person to be the sole manipulator of the controls of an airplane, going from, I believe, California to the East Coast or vice versa, one of the two. And Congress almost passed a law that said anyone under the age of 16 can't even touch the controls of an airplane. So the FAA was
Really?
not keen on giving anybody the chance under the age of 16 of even touch or doing anything along those lines. So no matter how many letters I got, no matter what I did, the FAA wasn't going to grant that exemption. But during that time frame, I was petitioning the FAA. I found out in Canada you only have to be 14 to fly solo up there. So I got this another bright idea. Um, why don't you go up to Canada, get your student pilot's license, fly solo up there, and then come back and then show the U.S. that you did it the right way and safely, and then they'll definitely grant your exemption. But as I mentioned before, I came from a family that had the funds to keep a roof over my head and give me everything I needed, but an international trip to Canada to go flying for a couple of weeks wasn't in the cards, so I decided to raise the money on my own. I literally wrote
Wow.
over 100 different aviation companies asking for sponsorship to be able to go up there and see if I could do this. And it was over 90 companies, 91 companies was the very first yes that I got. And I'm so thankful that I did not give up during that time period because that's really what started my career.
Wow. So it took 91 companies out of the 100 plus for you to get that yes.
The first yes. And then I just got the first yes. So I got over 90 no's before I got my very first yes. And I know that there was times that I probably thought about giving up, but for whatever reason, I didn't. And I'm thankful. And then I had to continue writing until I got to about 103 companies before I got all the money that I needed to be able to do it. And I finally did. And I remember July 14th, 1998, got the chance to go up to Timmins, Ontario, Canada, and fly a Cessna 172 for my very first time by myself inside of the airplane. And that was one of the coolest experiences ever.
Wow. In a place that you, I mean, I'm sure they took you up and they wanted to make sure you're able to fly, but it's still an airspace you don't know, a place you don't know,
Yeah.
a country you've probably never been to. You're
Never
traveling
been to before.
you're traveling internationally so that you can be one of the youngest people to fly solo because you're determined to prove that you can do it yourself at this young age of 13.
Yeah, and to be honest, it wasn't so much about let me try to set a record or do something along those lines because like the Guinness Book of World Records doesn't recognize any young aviation stunts like that
Okay.
because they don't want to promote
Safety,
people
right?
getting trying to
Mhm.
do it from a record standpoint. So it wasn't about that for me. It was really for me. I thought at this time that if I do go to a different country and I get my pilot's license, my student pilot's license, and I fly an airplane solo, the FAA is going to grant my exemption to fly solo before my 16th birthday. Didn't quite work out the way that I thought, but it did teach me a lot about not giving up. I mean, it also taught me that when you do get those no's, you have to keep pushing forward and you cannot stop. Otherwise, your dream's going to give up. And even when I came back to the United States, the FAA didn't grant the exemption, but it gave me another opportunity, which was to start up my own company when I was 15 years old. And I started off selling flight training materials with King Schools and Rob Machado's flight training products. And then I got a distributorship agreement with Gulf Coast Avionics. And between those things, doing that while I was in high school from 15 to 18, and some of the speaking engagements that I was doing, I made enough money on my own to purchase my very first airplane before I even graduated high school. Bought a Christian Eagle 2, a high performance aerobatic biplane, my senior year of high school, a couple of weeks before I graduated.
So you went from the US telling you you can't fly solo before you're 16, doing it in another country, coming back at this time, as you said, you were making enough from selling study materials, and then you
And
have speaking
pilot supplies.
engagements. Right. You've got speaking engagements. The FAA has you going to different places to now be the spokesperson, even though they told you you can't do this before X age.
Well, I didn't start working with the FAA till I was in college, but I was working with EAA. I became the national spokesman for the Young Eagles program, the program that gave me my very first start. I mean, which is still a great program to date. More than 2.5 million young people between the ages of 8 to 17 have taken a free flight inside of a certified airplane with a licensed pilot to see if it might be something that they're interested in doing. That's how I got my start. So when EA gave me the opportunity to kind of go around and talk to other young people about this great free program, I jumped on it. And that gave me the opportunity to kind of meet a ton of people inside of the aviation industry and also kind of really help my career grow.
So I'm noticing a huge trend here with you. A lot of it has to do with networking. So not only just, as you started working with the EAA and talking to other young people, you're building your network there with other instructors and people in aviation, but the same thing when you were 12, 13 years old after taking that Eagle flight and volunteering. I'm sure you spoke to every person, every
Yeah.
pilot you could, and anything they needed, you were happy to help with.
That's one of the big things about aviation that I think more people need to realize, especially those starting off. It is a community. It's not just the industry. If you show that you're willing to put in a little bit of work, that you're willing to show up prepared, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be willing to become a mentor, befriend you, and give you some opportunities. And by doing that, you will accelerate your career faster than any amount of money will ever give you the opportunity to do. And there's so many mentoring programs out there for all sorts of different career options inside of the aviation industry that people need to take advantage of. NBA, the National Business Aviation Association, for example, has their mentor program, which can give you access to pilots and corporate flight departments, mechanics, flight managers, cabin crew, whatever area of the industry that you want to get involved in, aircraft sales. You get the opportunity to meet people that if you show them that you're willing to work and put in the work to be able to make your dreams become a reality, they're willing to take you under their wing and give you an opportunity to make your dreams happen.
Build your network, leverage it, and put in the work.
That's it.
And that'll take you further than dollars will.
100%, because eventually you're going to run out of the money from whoever's giving it to you if you're not willing to actually show up prepared and put in the work for it. But if you actually, do what you say you're going to do, you work hard and you try your best at it. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've been given by people that have been so far where I want to be at down the road, giving me an opportunity to kind of get a break in whatever segment of the industry it was, just because when I took the initiative to ask the question, but when I did ask the question, I was prepared and I was willing to work for it if they said yes.
Perfect. You had to do your part. These things
Yes,
aren't gifts. This is all earned. It's all earned by
100%.
way of hard work.
You have to definitely be willing to work. And as you said, it's not a gift, but it is definitely a relationship, because some of these people, they don't have to go out there and give young people an opportunity, but they really love aviation. They love the community. They love the industry, and they're willing to help people grow. You just have to be willing to ask for the help and, like you said, show up and put in the work.
Leveraging that network that you built. These things aren't just gifted. These contacts don't just come about out of thin air. That comes from work, from networking and nurturing that network. I'm sure these people are people that, it's important to nurture and to interface. Getting someone's phone number one time doesn't that's not networking. That is
Yeah.
making a contact. The building of the network is, checking in every so often, nurturing that network, asking if they have anything new coming, they need help with anything, and vice versa, correct?
And you hit a key point on that, asking if they need help on anything. And most of the time, the people who you are networking with have more resources or opportunities than what you can really truly provide. But sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's not about a connection or something along those lines. Seeing that you're willing to volunteer, I think volunteering with aviation groups and organizations is one of the best ways to network, whether it's an organization like EAA and helping out at AirVenture or Sun and Fun, Aerospace Expo, or NBA, or OBAP, or any of the aviation associations or groups out there. Find out if you can volunteer at their conventions or their conferences. Do whatever needs to be done, because you will meet so many members, the influential members that are involved in those organizations, that if they see you putting in work, it not only gives you an opportunity to be able to gain scholarships, be able to get job connections, be able to get chances to fly certain types of airplanes or work on certain things, get internships. There's so many benefits of being able to network and volunteer. And then the second part about that, which is a huge component of it, is you get some really great experiences, and being able to give back inside the aviation community does a lot more than just giving you the opportunity to be able to build your career, but it also gives you the opportunity to learn a lot. I think a great example of this is the Commemorative Air Force that operates the world's largest collection of World War II airplanes. Their entire organization is basically volunteer run. So if you ever have an interest inside of like operating or being around military airplanes, volunteering with the Commemorative Air Force is a great example of that being an opportunity to actually get around it. And that's the way you would even eventually get the chance to fly them. So I think it's really important to volunteer in whatever aspect of the aviation industry that piques your interest. And you will be surprised how many doors open up if you just give a little bit, and how much will be returned to you by
Sounds like I've got some reaching out to do. There are definitely
doing it.
some more folks I'd like to meet, and some connections I'd like to make, just to share in this passion and to continue to learn from the experiences of others.
Absolutely.
So now let's jump back into your story a little bit and talk about, after buying this airplane at the age of 18, you went and bought basically like an aerobatic airplane to go fly around and do flips and loops and whatnot. And you're 18 years old. So where did that take you?
So when I was around 13, I went to Sun and Fun. Mr. Fox was kind enough to take me to Sun and Fun, and that was my very first air show I had ever attended in my life. And I remember on the very first day seeing the air show performances and falling in love with that and being like, I am going to do that. But I had to do a few steps to be able to make that become a reality. One soloing, getting my private, and then after I got my private, I got the chance to do a little bit of aerobatic training and an extra 300L down in St. Augustine, where the extra dealership was based at. But I really couldn't afford to do it and actually learn how to do that. And then I was fortunate enough to meet a couple members of the Red Eagle Airshow team, Buck Roteman and Dan McClung, and they kind of took me under their wing, and Buck trained me. He was actually the previous owner of the Christian Eagle 2 that I bought, and I learned the basics. And I remember literally after about a week after I graduated high school, I moved to Atlanta, said goodbye to the parents basically, rented a room in someone's house near Falcon Field in Peachtree City. And I flew every single day. I was no lie, I was flying probably 4 to 5 times a day doing aerobatic training for it the entire summer. And about a week to 2 weeks before I actually left to go to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University for college, I passed my ACE exam, my aerobatic competency evaluation for a level 4 aerobatic waiver. And then about 2 weeks after I started college, I did my very first air show at the Valdalia Onion Festival in South Georgia, and flew my very first show at 18. So I went from seeing an air show at 13 to working my butt off for 5 years and getting the chance to actually make that dream happen and be inverted a couple hundred feet off the ground in front of a pretty large audience for my first time at 18.
That's incredible. What was that feeling like? Flying that air show after, you know, you remember where it started at 13. You saw this, you're like, oh my goodness, I have to do this. And now, walk me through it. Your plane's ready, you're suited up, and your fingertips have to be tingling saying, I'm actually making this happen.
Yes and no. I mean, just like getting a chance to solo in Canada at 14, getting a chance to become the first student pilot to fly the Cirrus SR-20 at 16 here in the United States, and then getting a chance to fly my very first air show at 18. All of these goals had been set years prior. So, it by the time it actually arrived, I was so focused on actually getting it done. I wasn't as nervous as what I think I probably would have did if they would have just came easily. I mean, when you put in a couple years of work to be able to make something happen, yes, you're a little bit nervous and you're definitely excited about doing it, but you're ready just to get it and get into it. And I remember getting a chance to turn on the engine, getting prepped and mentally prepared for that first show, and then taking off my aerobatic routine. I started up, I did an air start versus a ground start. And so I'm waiting a couple miles away from the field, the aerobatic box. And I remember when like the air boss tells me, Jamail, the box is yours. And then you come in, I start off 3,000 feet above the ground, pull in right over the center of show line. And then once you get to show center, pull down into a 45-degree down line and start the routine. And it is by far a cool experience by any means, but you're in the zone. It's not so much necessarily fun per se. You are in the zone because once again, even though it is fun, you are doing something inside of the aviation industry that is a little bit more dangerous than the average flight. But if you do it the right way, you can manage the risk appropriately. Making sure that you stick to the aerobatic routine that you've trained and practiced for, making sure that you don't do anything abnormal, that the airplane's performing the way that it's supposed to be, that you're performing the way that you're supposed to be doing. And you're so focused on what's going on that you don't really think about it until you get on the ground because there's a couple really big airshow performers out there that I remember listening to, like Sean D. Tucker, for example, who says he lived by this mantra that you are an ambassador of aviation when you're flying air shows out there, and if you have an accident or a mistake, you're going to be robbing some kid, some person, from that magic of aviation and flying. and when they have this memory of seeing an airplane crash. And I definitely did not want to do that. And that's something that's kind of stuck with me with everything that I've done. I've been fortunate enough that we've done a fair amount of media stuff all throughout my aviation career. And I know that if I do something wrong, whether it's on national television or TV show or at an air show or online with social media, that it's going to rob someone from that gift of flight. And that's one message that I would really stress to a lot of the social media content creators inside of the aviation space is it is an awesome opportunity to share aviation with people who would never see it otherwise, but make sure that you do it the right way because you don't want to rob someone of that gift of flight.
Right. And you yourself don't want to become a statistic.
No, absolutely not. My mom won't be too happy about it, nor with the rest of the industry. So it is something that I do take serious, and I hope other people take serious. I think it is something that we need to actually be conscious of
Mhm.
because social media has gotten so involved into the cockpit, which is a great thing. I don't have any issues with it. I just want to make sure that we all do it the right way.
Safety first. Aviation is inherently dangerous, but as you said, the statistics show it's usually pilot error, not the airplane itself failing. It's
Yeah,
a failure on the pilot's part. So that is avoidable. That we can fix,
100%.
even though we're flying airplanes that are older than most of us, and then some.
A
Right?
100%. I mean, my very first airplane I went up with inside of the Young Eagles program, I was 12 years old at the time, so it was more than 3 times my age. I mean, when I did not tell my parents that it was a 40-year-old airplane when I went flying for the first time because I doubt my mom would have let me go. But I mean, that's another misconception that we can hopefully educate the public about is that you could have a 40-year-old airplane, but it could be maintained
Right.
in perfect condition with the right owner. So age is just a number when it comes to aviation.
No, definitely, especially with the grave cost of it. I think if aviation was more affordable, we'd maybe see more people flying newer aircraft. But the fact that it's not something you have to throw away, just take care of it. As long as you get your maintenance, you take that seriously, and you make sure, as a student pilot, someone who doesn't own, that the plane that you're flying is well maintained. You better go over those logbooks. I think it's something that people do skip on, and I'm not saying all flight schools do, but there are some that have been getting in trouble lately for their maintenance logs having things missing.
I think there's a couple really huge initiatives that are going on, especially in the general aviation community, that will hopefully have a major impact on the affordability aspect of it. When you look at things like Mosaic and the light sport aircraft category, you look at Basic Med, all these
Mhm.
things that AOPA, EAA, and NBA and others are working hard on developing, they're really going to have a huge impact on the type of airplanes that the general aviation pilot enthusiast can fly at a much more economical standpoint as soon as those programs get passed into law.
Perfect. That sounds great. Aviation cheaper for the rest of us makes it more available to folks, which is awesome because
Absolutely.
like anybody else, this is something that you don't just want for yourself. You want everybody to experience this. This is life altering stuff.
I think as we were talking beforehand, I think one of the biggest things about aviation for me is it changes your perspective on the world, not just from a standpoint that I can hop inside of an airplane and I can visit 3 different cities in one single day, which is something that I've done on a pretty regular basis. But it also changes your perspective on problems that we go through. I mean, when you look at the fact that we are just a really small speck inside of this massive world that we live in, the little trivial problems that we go and experience on a daily basis don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's one of the coolest things that flying has taught me is that it's given me a different perspective of how I view the world, how I fly, and it's one of the cool things. I did an ad with Bose a couple years ago, and they asked me why do I fly, and my response was uh, it gives me a different perspective, and I still stand by that statement today.
You flew air shows, you had a blast, you really enjoyed it, but then you started working with more of these initiatives to get more people involved in aviation. Can we talk a little bit
So
about The Dream
Yeah,
Launch Tour.
after when I was in college at Embry-Riddle, I had the chance. The Late Show with David Letterman hit me up and gave me the opportunity to fly aerobatics on that show, and then that got the attention of the FAA and a few other agencies and associations. And I literally had a meeting with the administrator of the FAA and was asked would I be willing to serve as their very first ambassador for aviation and space education. Um, and I was like, absolutely. It was kind of like a continuation on a larger scale of what I was doing with EA and the Young Eagles program. And I saw it as an opportunity to hopefully show other people all across the country that aviation is a really cool experience, as a career or as a hobby. And the FAA had an interest in doing it because, similar to now, there was a looming aviation workforce crisis that we even knew about in the early 2000s, and it's only getting a little bit worse. And so they saw this as an opportunity to hopefully just raise some awareness of some of the aviation career opportunities out there in America's youth. And I was happy to serve in that capacity. I've been doing it now for over 20 years. But that really took me on a road a lot. When I was in college and then FA came knocking on the door, we came up with this concept called the Dream Launch Tour, where literally every single week I would schedule all my classes Tuesday through Thursday, and then I would hop in an airplane Thursday afternoon. Cirrus was a huge supporter of the tour, Bose, and a few other companies, and they gave me the resources to be able to travel to a different city literally every single week during the school year. And I would go to one city and speak to 3 to 4 high schools on a Friday, do Young Eagle flights on a Saturday, and then I'll fly to a different city Monday, do the same thing. Monday afternoon, hop in the airplane, fly back to Daytona to be in class first thing Tuesday morning. And I did that for 20 plus cities every single year for pretty much all of college. But it was a really cool experience because I did that for about 14 years straight. We ended up going to over 1,000 different schools across the country, and I spoke to more than 60,000 students about career opportunities. And I can't tell you how many letters and emails that we got after the tour of people saying, I never even really thought about that. There were even students that I would see before I graduated Riddle. I saw a couple of students on campus that had saw the Dream Launch Tour presentation, and that was one of the things that kind of influenced their decision. And that was a really cool experience to be able to do that and to know that we've done that and have continued to receive some of these emails and letters for over a decade has been something that's really kind of kept me going. After about 14 years, I got really busy with business and kind of took that kind of went to the side for a little bit. But then last year, all this stuff, even before what's happened in the first quarter of 2025, started to kind of refreshing in my memory that we really have some major issues from an aviation workforce crisis that we need to kind of look at. Despite the fact that you have so many airline pilots that are making close to $500,000 a year, working 15 days a month, ATC can top out at over $200,000 a year with a government job. All of these great opportunities out there, you start looking at the numbers, and like if you go through the FAA database, 45% of all the ATPs that are registered in the active FAA database will legally have to retire within 14 years. When you look at some of the statistics and forecasts that have been created, some of them are as high as saying that we're going to have a pilot shortage approaching 30,000 people by 2032. So when all these numbers are kind of coming out there, 45% being required to retire, you look at the FAA amount of air traffic controllers that are mandated to retire by 56. These numbers are not just one segment of the industry, it's almost all throughout the entire industry. You look at the amount of mechanics that we need. We need even more mechanics than what we need pilots. And it's an industry wide issue that we really need to do our part of one, showing people the exciting aspects of the aviation industry, two, showing them that the resources and the career jobs are actually available for them if they decide to go it. And then three, giving them the resources to actually make those dreams become a reality if we can spark that interest. So we decided to relaunch the Dream Launch Tour this year, but I knew that I needed to do something to fulfill on that third part that I mentioned, which was giving them some of the resources. Because it's one thing to spark an interest in someone about aviation, But if they don't have a path to be able to accomplish it, if they don't have the resources to be able to do it, we're kind of doing them a disservice by showing them the shiny new object, but not giving them the resources to be able to do it. So the number one question I actually got on tour every single year, almost every single school I went to is, how can I pay for it? I knew there was a ton of resources out there, but obviously there's a disconnect. So I went to work at the end of last year and created a program called Aviation Start, or really a resource, not even a program, that is aviationstart.org. And it is the world's largest aviation scholarship and career resource that's available completely for free for anyone to be able to find scholarships to help them achieve their career goals in any aspect of the aviation industry. We're talking pilots, air traffic controllers, mechanics, airport operations, aviation business, pretty much any career field inside of the aviation industry that you're thinking of. There's over $20 million worth of scholarships to be able to help you be able to achieve that dream.
Wow, that's a lot of money. I know we sat down and we talked a little bit earlier. You were telling me that a lot of that money goes unclaimed. Why is that?
Because of the disconnect, because people aren't aware. Like if you went out and you asked people, did you know that there's type ratings that you can get on a scholarship basis for helicopters, for airplanes, that mechanics can get their actual certification courses for all sorts of different airplanes available out there? NBA does quite a few of those. The Whirly Girls Association does quite a few of them. Women in Aviation does a lot of them. And one disclaimer that I really want to throw out there is, when you look at some of these affinity aviation associations and groups, OBAP, Women in Aviation, the National Gay Pilots Association, all of these different groups that have really been built up because there was a lack of a community resource for them, none of them require you to be part of that group to be able to apply for those scholarships. If you are just a member of these organizations, you have the capability and opportunity to take advantage of some of the resources to be able to grow the aviation community. So I think a lot of people aren't aware that these opportunities and scholarships even exist. And then they think, for some of them that are aware, they don't think that they are able to apply for them. So there's just a major disconnect about some of the resources that are out there, or people just don't know about it. For example, there's over 300 air shows that happen every single year inside of the United States. The International Council of Air Shows, ICAS, lists all of those air shows on their website, by the way. So if you're looking for an air show, make sure you go to ICAS to be able to find one near you. But in addition to that, a lot of these groups and fly-ins and air shows actually raise money to have scholarships every single year.
Oh,
And
wow.
most people are completely unaware of that. There's some really good ones out there. The Capital City Air Show in California is a really good
Mhm.
one that gives out a ton of them. There's a lot of museums, like the Museum of Flight in Seattle gives out a ton of different scholarships. And the 20 million that we have listed in scholarships and grants on aviationstart.org, the vast majority of them, you do not have to be a resident to live in a certain area to be able to apply for them. Some of them you do. Some of them do have age limits or age restrictions or groups that you have to be in them, but a lot of them don't. And as we were talking, I mean, there's opportunities to get your tailwheel endorsement, seaplane rating, instrument rating, all sorts of different things, if you're just willing to put in a little bit of work and apply for some of these scholarships out there.
Right. So how does somebody go about navigating aviationstart.org? You go on, you create a profile, walk me through kind of some of the process.
You go to aviationstart.org, click scholarships and training, and then it will give you the opportunity to register. And then once a month, we're literally updating the database. So you get, right now, you get an email from us once a month that gives you all of the scholarships with all of the additional new ones that we just found out. For example, today we found out about 5 additional new ones that got added into the database, and that's literally happening every single week. And the other thing that I would love to tell everybody is that if you are aware of any aviation scholarships out there, please let us know, because we really want to create the most comprehensive list. We already have the largest, but we know that there's a lot more out there that can be added to it. And I really want to create a resource that really helps anyone get involved in whatever career aspect of the aviation industry that they have, and be able to help guide them to be able to do that for free.
It's one thing, as you said, to inspire somebody, but it's another thing to also help facilitate their ability
Yeah.
to do what you just inspired them to do.
Yeah. And it's a complete package. I think, like I said earlier, you kind of do people a disservice if you show them the shiny object, but don't give them either the pathway to be able to do it or give them the resources to be able to start. And I'm not sitting here saying that all these programs or scholarships will make it easy for you. But it'll definitely soften the blow and be able to help give you guidance to be able to achieve it. You do need to put in a little bit of work to be able to do it. There's some really great organizations out there. I mean, when just starting off with like the Young Eagles program, or for example, AOPA's high school program. AOPA has created a high school curriculum that's literally in over 1,400 schools all across the country that more than 29,000 students have participated in, that gives you the opportunity to get prepared to take your private pilot written exam completely for free while you're in high school, or to pass your Part Drone 107 license before you graduate high school. So if you want to become a drone operator, it helps get you prepared for that. The Civil Air Patrol has a maintenance track that if you're interested in going the A&P route, that you can get exposed to that aspect of the industry. There's so many programs that kind of give you an option to get involved if you have an interest in it. You just got to take advantage of it. And nobody's going to hand it to you, but we can at least give you the options of all these different options exist, and then it's up to you to walk through the door.
Definitely. But you don't know what you don't know. You don't know these things are out there if you don't have pilots in your direct,
Yeah.
vicinity, family, friends, or you follow somebody like yourself that is sharing this story and telling people that, of the opportunities that are available to them. You'd have no idea.
Yeah, I was laughing at Sun and Fun. I got the chance to meet a bunch of the content creators that are pretty big names inside the industry, and I kind of laughed because, in a lot of ways, social media content creators like yourself that specialize in aviation are the 21st century airshow pilots. Because air shows, when I started flying, was the way
Right.
that a lot of people got exposed to what airplanes could do and kind of get that spark of aviation. And fortunately, air shows aren't going anywhere. They're still going to be around, and it's still the second largest spectator sport in the country. But more people are finding out about aviation through their phones when you're just scrolling on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. And with all these content creators and a lot of them are doing a really fantastic job of exposing the positive aspects of aviation to people. They're the new airshow performers that are introducing the magic of flight to millions of people every single year.
Right. No, it's very different, right? Because when you talk about being at an event, for the most part, it's mainly the ticket sales. That the amount of tickets you sell is
Yeah.
the amount of eyes that see something. Yeah, there'll
Yeah.
be a few enthusiasts who couldn't make it will go and watch it online. But nowadays, you've got, people generating hundreds of thousands of views a day on
Yeah.
aviation related, one creator alone. Then there's other people who are mid-sized creators that are getting thousands of views a day and small micro influencers that are getting a couple hundred. But you add all that up, there's millions of people viewing aviation related content every day. Even some of those folks, they don't know of the opportunities that are available to other people. Like me, I didn't know about any of this stuff. Like I'm an adult, I'm 35. I paid for my training on my own. It was expensive, yes, but I was able to kind of make it work. But knowing that these things are there for other people, not necessarily just young people, other adults who want to maybe make a career shift
Absolutely.
or have been thinking about it is amazing. So I think I definitely want to do my part in putting out more information in terms of how people can get involved and some of the resources that are out there that are available for folks who, maybe can't afford it or, need a little extra help because that can
Yeah.
change a lot of things.
And I mean, that was the real reason. I wanted Aviation Start to literally be people's start in aviation, to be able to give them the resources, whether you're a young kid that can find out about programs like the Young Eagles program, the Civil Air Patrol, AOPA's high school program, and see if there's one of those schools in your local area that's participating and doing the program, or some of these other youth programs out there that's available, or be able to give them the resources and the scholarships and the grants, as well as within the next coming months, we're going to have a really in-depth career section for each one of the major aviation career fields with interviews with people that are established inside of the career fields, as well as what it's like to go through training with some people that are just starting out, their experiences, the tough parts, the bad days, the good days, all that information, as well as like a pathway of, do you have to go to an aviation college? Do you have to go to a college in general? One of the
Right.
things that most people don't realize is, now technically you don't have to go to college to become an air traffic controller. About 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, but the FAA recently changed that. You only have to have 1 year prior work experience, literally 1 year work experience, which you could do while you're in high school. So as soon as you graduate high school, you could apply to become an air traffic controller with the FAA. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. So there's a lot of changes that are going on inside the industry that people just aren't aware of the specifics for it. So they'll be able to get all of that information once again completely for free at aviationstart.org, as well as some of the resources out there. But I just to harp on the content aspect of things, what you guys are doing, and like you also, you're teaching me some things out there. For example, I had no idea about the fact that Navi, for example, AI, is doing some really fantastic things in the flight training arena, and getting exposed to that through online social media content is one of those things I'm talking about, getting a chance for people to learn about all aspects of the aviation industry through people like you and the content that you're creating. So I give big kudos to what you're doing, as well as so many other people out there online that's trying to make a difference in this community.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's again, it's been something I'm extremely passionate about. Aviation is everything. It consumes at least 90% of my thoughts. I don't know how I function throughout the day thinking about anything else. It's crazy. Uh, I'm sure you can relate that. So, to some level, you're just like,
100%. Yeah.
it,
Even after 20 plus years, it's still the same. So
right?
I feel you on that.
It's given me some really unique opportunities. I've met some amazing people. All of my new friends now are all from aviation, and they're all walks of life, all age groups, you know, teenagers who are just starting to fly versus people in their 80s, 70s and 80s who are retired airline pilots flying. I'm building a network of amazing people with amazing stories that I'm hoping to share to inspire others to say, I want to do that. That looks so amazing.
One of the things I love that aviation does, and you kind of just touched on it, is that it's a great equalizer. An airplane does not care what color you are, how much money you have, if you're male, female, your age, none of that matters. It's about whether you can fly the airplane. And that's the only thing that actually matters when you get inside of the cockpit. And because of that, there's a there's a level of respect that you get when people know that you become a private, an instrument, a CFI, a commercial pilot, whatever the case may be. You might have your seaplane rating, your instrument rating, you might fly aerobatics, you do bush flying, whatever the case is. No matter what your background is, when you can kind of spout off some of those different things, you earn a certain level of respect from other aviators and
Right.
people involved in the industry, that it's just a great equalizer. So you get the chance to meet friends in all aspects of the community, no matter what your background is, and you guys immediately have a connection. So that's one of the coolest things about aviation, is it allows people to get connected no matter what their background actually is.
I joined a club. And the club I joined has 35 members. Most of them are in their 50s and 60s, and I've been flying since well before I was thought of. So the stories that I'm hearing, the things that I'm immersed in, are enriching my flying experience and giving me
And
so much more knowledge.
And that's something that I think more people need to be aware of, especially even the people that are on the career track that's trying to become a 121 airline pilot guy, is flying clubs are a great resource. Most of them you can't use to be able to get your private pilot's license, but
Right.
after you get your private, you can utilize it to build flight time. And on average, you're going to save typically between 20 to 25% of
Right.
what you'd be paying for rental at a flight school. And there's a great resource that AOPA has put out, the AOPA Flying Club resource, that kind of gives you a guide of all the flying clubs in the nearby area that anybody can go onto and find a flying club and potentially save up to 25% per hour that they're flying. And when you're looking to add, 500 to 1,000 hours of flight time, that adds up.
That's a lot of money. No, definitely. I got my high performance and complex endorsement recently, and I'm currently paying in my club for a 182 and a 182 RG what I was paying for a Cessna 182, a 172
Absolutely.
at a flight school. I was paying 230 an hour. I'm paying 200 and 215 for a 182 and an RG. So it's
And not
crazy.
only is the price typically cheaper, but you typically get a better quality airplane, whether it's avionics, maintenance, paint, and interior. Yeah, I saw this year you've been flying a 182 RG. Are you still planning on flying that up to Oshkosh this year?
That's the goal. Yeah, I just got to get
Cool.
clearance from the club. Pretty much, you can use it for a week with no questions asked. But to go to Kosh, I want to go for the whole week. So I'd probably want closer to like 9 or 10 days. I don't want to have to
Yeah.
try to force the issue to fly it all in one day. Either, I'd
Yeah.
like to have a buffer, a day and a half going, a day and a half coming back. Because it's a long way for me. That's 1,600 miles or so.
Fully understand, but it will be definitely a fun flight to do. You got to do at least one cross country as a general aviation pilot. I did my very first one. Well, I did my first East Coast from south to north inside of the Christian Eagle when I was 18. Ended up getting stuck because of weather for a couple of days in Pennsylvania. You learn what it's like being inside of an airplane that doesn't even have an artificial horizon. All you have is an altimeter, airspeed indicator, and a magnetic compass. Trying to travel around the country, and that will teach you a lot, to say the
Wow.
least. But then when I was in college, in the SR20, there might have been SR22 at this point. I did a cross country from Daytona to Prescott, Arizona,
Yep.
in one night after class, and that was a long trip. So I highly recommend you take your time doing that 1 to 2 day
Right.
experience versus trying to do it all in a 10-hour time period like I did.
I'll be caravanning it with another club, some other club members. So that'll be great. There'll
Cool.
be probably like 4 or 5 of us flying. They've all done it, been going for 10, 15, 20 years. So they know the route and I'll just be tagging along, learning and being a
Nice.
part of it. I am so excited. The thought of Oshkosh is already keeping me up at night. I cannot
Yeah,
wait.
there's nothing like going to aviation mecca in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Um, I've been going there since I was 13, and it's funny to see that town outside of the 1 week in late July, early August, because it's totally different than what it is during that week. But if you had never been to AirVenture, and you're an aviation enthusiast, you have to go. Not only is it the largest aviation gathering, the best air show possible inside the United States. You really get the chance to meet so many really interesting, cool people. Everybody, I remember, like when I first started going, getting the chance to meet like Dick and Bert Rutan, to all of the major air show performers in the country, to industry leaders
Right.
that run all of the different aviation associations. There's so much history there. Some really cool airplanes, some awesome flying, and some great new friends that you can make. So if you have not been to Oshkosh, make sure AirVenture 2025 is on your list.
When you get your private pilot license, the world gets smaller
Yeah,
because it, it,
it's
it
true.
does. A weekend
It's true.
trip a weekend trip you would do in a car, you say, maybe 5 hours ish is my comfortable driving limit for a weekend trip. Well, 5 hours of driving is here to LA or here to like almost the border of Oregon. In a 182 RG, I can be well into Oregon in 2.5 hours. So now that 5 hours damn near gets me to, Portland, Seattle. The world is just condensing.
Yeah, I remember in college, right after I got the Cirrus, I kept the Christian Eagle in my hometown in Augusta, Georgia. Um, so there would be some mornings I would literally wake up normal time, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, hop inside of the Cirrus, fly to Augusta, do an hour, 2 hour practice inside of the Eagle, and I would still be back in time to have lunch with friends at college by the middle of the day. So I would be able to wake up, go practice to stay proficient flying aerobatics, and then be back to have lunch with my friends before class or whatever the case might be doing. And I did that a fair amount. So, as you mentioned, having an airplane um, opens up your world. And like I said, definitely gives you a different perspective on life.
That's it. One that makes you very grateful because you just realize, like, wow, everything is so small. Everything you look up at when you're standing on the ground that seems so grand is so tiny when you're at 5,000 feet looking at it in a plane.
Yeah.
You know, all the
Yep.
skyscrapers in your city don't seem so big and significant anymore.
Yeah.
And then you learn how small planes really are because, you know, ATC calls out traffic and says you've got a plane 4 miles, you know, same direction or opposite direction. You're looking for it until it's a quarter mile from you. You finally find it.
And then ATC has a way of humbling every single GA pilot, especially when you're going into a big airport and you got some big corporate jet or airliner behind you, and they're asking you to keep your speed up, and you're at like max throttle the entire time, trying to go into a Class Charlie or Bravo type airport. But even with those difficulties, ATC does a pretty cool job, and I would not want to be behind the screens trying to fit a Cessna 172 in between, you know, a 767 and a 737, but
Right.
more power to them for doing it.
The question you said that people often ask, like, is it required to go to aviation university? It isn't anymore. And you mentioned going to Embry-Riddle, which is like the aviation university. So how was that in your experience? Not just going there and doing all the things that you're doing. That's a challenging place to get into, a challenging place to survive and thrive in. But you have all these other things taking up so much of your time. Every weekend you're in a different city in the country. How did you find time to not just survive that, but to, you know, to do well in such a challenging atmosphere?
I will say there's only one con of Embry-Riddle, and that is it's an expensive school. But what would you expect for going to the world's largest and truthfully the greatest aviation institution? Whether you want to go become a professional pilot, aviation business like I did, they have the number one aeronautical engineering program in the country, literally over 35 different degree programs for every aspect of the aviation industry that you can think of. So if you're going to go to a school like that, it is going to be expensive. But if you're willing to make the sacrifice for that, the networking opportunities that are available by being a student at Embry-Riddle is not comparable. No other school can compare to that. There are some really great aviation oriented universities out there, as well as state programs that have aviation programs,
Right.
and they all do a good job. But if you want to go to the best, you have to go to Embry-Riddle for multiple reasons. But that alumni connection is one of the best things about the university, and then also just to have the resources. When you go to the largest aviation oriented university in the country, the amount of airplanes that they have there, the type of labs that they have, the internship opportunities that are available with major organizations and companies across the country are insane. So, in general, pretty much any student that's going there has the opportunity to do some really cool and amazing experiences. And the reason why I mentioned that is because just because I was doing some pretty cool and unique things, there was a lot of other students that were doing just equally amazing things, just maybe not as much in the public spotlight
Mhm.
as what I was doing. So it wasn't abnormal per se for what I was doing in that sense. So I felt at home the entire time that I was going to Embry-Riddle. I was an aviation business administration major at their Daytona Beach campus. I absolutely loved it. I strongly encourage people to look at all of the different career options that are out there. When you look at like Garmin's auto land capability that's now filtering in to single engine airplanes. 10 years ago, that was unheard of. And now you have single engine airplanes that if a passenger or a pilot got incapacitated, a passenger can press a button and the airplane comes down, lands, applies brakes, shuts down the engine. All of these different things communicates with other airplanes in the area to make sure that it's absolutely a safe endeavor. There's so much technological advancement that we're going to continue to do on that front that even a computer science degree at an aviation university is something that 20 years ago I don't think really even existed, but that exists today. But I also want it to be known that there are other aviation universities that you can go to. Not everybody wants to go to Prescott, Arizona, or Daytona Beach, Florida. So check out all of the different organizations out there. University Aviation Association, UAA, kind of has a membership list of all of the different universities that exist, what type of degree programs they offer, and check that out if you're in high school and you're looking for opportunities out there, because there's a lot. But then if you're like yourself, Osa, and maybe past that stage, but still looking for maybe a degree, check out Embry Riddle's worldwide degree program too.
That's incredible. Oh yeah. I mean, I got a degree in business. I studied business and loved it. Um, Started working. I was a data analyst at Monster Energy, and I didn't like desk life. And that's not,
Yeah,
not a knock on the company. The company was great to work for. The vibe was great. It was just, I realized sitting at a desk ultimately wasn't something that I was going to be happy doing for, 30 years of my life. So
totally understandable.
I made a career
And so
change and
then you
pivot.
became a firefighter after that?
Right. So then I became a firefighter, and no 2 days are the same.
I've held 3 to 4 jobs in various different fields my entire life. From being a registered federal lobbyist in DC for almost 4 years, while working with the FAA, while selling airplanes, doing a host of different things all at the same time, multiple times. So it's definitely possible. Nothing today states that you have to be locked into one particular career field. And that's probably one of the things I've enjoyed the most with my experience in aviation is literally every part of the day I'm doing something different. So it's never monotonous. I'm always on the road traveling. So that time does get a little bit stressful at times. But I'm still single, not married yet. So I can deal with that and afford to be on the road and be in a different city pretty much every single night. And that's definitely going to be the case for the rest of this year while we're on tour.
That's incredible. So of all the places that you've been traveling to, which one do you like most? Because I'm sure you've gotten to see quite a few parts of the country.
I mean, pretty much most of North America for sure. There's nothing like flying in the Caribbean. Um, that's definitely one of the coolest experiences. I'm looking to do a trip later this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed that it works out. And we'll be bringing that on social media if it ends up happening. But I'm definitely extremely, I'll probably say that's the coolest, most fun aspects of any of the flying that I've done. I've done a lot of work with the Cayman Islands Civil Aviation Authority ever since I was like 17 years old. They used to do this massive aviation caravan where they would have like 100 GA airplanes leave from Key West and fly over Cuba down to the Cayman Islands for International Aviation Week. And I started going to that when I was 17. A good friend of mine that lives out in California, Lynn Freeman, introduced me to it, and it was the coolest thing seeing 100 plus airplanes flying over Cuba going to the Cayman Islands. So stuff like that, just some really cool experiences. But for me, it's not necessarily the place; it's more the experience. And flying the Sun and Fun, flying the Air Venture, doing 100 plus airplane caravans to places. Those are all cool. Flying air shows. All of my highlight reel of aviation in my own mind deals with experiences more so than actual places that I've just gone to.
That sounds like a really, really cool experience, and to do it internationally with people from kind of
Yeah.
all over. And I know the Cayman Islands are beautiful. So looking down
Yeah.
and seeing that those amazing turquoise blue waters, um, something different.
The only thing that I'm kind of scared about doing is I can't swim. So I will be taking swimming lessons before I do this trip.
Good for you.
Uh, I mean, even though you have life rafts and stuff like that, it's still smarter just to be prepared just in case, God
I
forbid,
agree.
something
I
happens.
agree. But you know what's funny about this can't swim thing? You also can't fly.
That's true. That's true. That's
But
true.
yeah, it's incredible. So if there was one thing that you could like tell your 12-year-old self now being where you are, what would that be?
Do not give up. No matter how many no's you were told, do not give up. And then the second thing is be prepared. Uh, if you get the opportunity to sit at the table, make sure that you keep your seat at that table. The kind of top things that I would tell myself is
Mhm.
don't give up, be prepared, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
If other young people see this and are out there listening, You follow these 3 steps and you'll have the opportunity. You know, you're going to have to fight for it. Nothing is free, nothing is easy, but you can earn and work towards having an amazing life and career in aviation. Like yours is something I didn't necessarily even know was possible in terms of what you
Yeah.
did with your career in aviation. To me, it was like, oh, you're a pilot, you're a mechanic, ATC, and that's it. There's a whole nother world out there.
There's a lot of opportunities out there. When like one of the cool things that you'll see when you go to AirVenture this year is the literally probably 1,000+ companies that will be there that sell some small gadget or component or do some type of service for some aspect of some general aviation airplane. And each one of those companies typically has at least 20 to 30+ employees that work there. So as we mentioned at the very beginning, there's so much that's needed and required to be able to
Mhm.
actually make these airplanes fly and continue to fly for 40+ years, that there's a career opportunity out there inside of the aviation, even more so than inside of the cockpit.
I'm glad that we were able to explore some of them and, you know, I hope to enlighten folks as to some of the opportunities that are out there that they've never heard of. I myself learned about a bunch. So I know if I'm learning about it and I'm not the most knowledgeable in terms of aviation, but I'm sure there are other folks out there who are like, oh, I didn't know that was possible either. So thank you for that exposure and for sharing your story. Let's jump into the rapid fire round real quick.
Let's go.
Uh, in terms of your dream cockpit, if you could drop anything to fly, you know, any aircraft, past, present, what would that be?
I've had the chance to fly everything from a F-18 to a Christian Eagle 2 and a bunch of different jets. But the airplane that I have been infatuated with since I was a little kid and going to Sun and Fun was a Velocity experimental airplane. So that was has been on my bucket list for quite some time.
All right. So now must have gear. What aviation piece of tech or gear do you feel like you refuse to fly without?
Um, you have to have a GPS no matter what. I think is the biggest thing, and sunglasses. Um, when you're flying in, especially into the sun,
Hmm.
sunglasses are necessary. If you're flying aerobatics, you got to have a parachute on board, but GPS over any.
So now for snack attack, you do a lot of flying, you go all over the country. What is your favorite cross country snack?
Sour Patch Kids.
Yes, finally somebody who likes sweets like I do. There we go. Awesome. And then for like diner diaries, I'm sure you had the opportunity to fly to many different places and try different airport diners. Which one to you was the most memorable?
You know, I am not the biggest fan of dining on the airport. Truthfully speaking, if
Hmm.
I'm going somewhere, I like to immerse myself in the culture of whatever's
Okay.
going on in that city. So I'm asking whoever's at the airport, what's the best local cuisine and where's it at? And I'm going to try to do it on a quick airport run and the airport's courtesy car.
Okay. Respect. That's awesome. So, of those places, then, what town have you visited where you were like, you know what? The food here was phenomenal and I would go back just for that?
I am a huge seafood fan, so I would say probably Destin, Florida has some really cool seafood places right on the coast that you can get fresh seafood, and that by far is my go-to.
And your favorite sound. You have flown in every type of airplane you can think of. You've done it all. What is your favorite like airplane sound? Is it, you know, the roar of the engine? If so, what engine? Or is it the tires, you know, screeching as you come in and butter a landing?
I mean, a business jet engine startup is the coolest sound that I can really think of. A
Really?
P-51 Merlin engine would probably be a close to, but a jet like a turbine engine on a small corporate jet spooling up is the coolest sound that I can think of inside of aviation.
Okay. I haven't been privy to that yet. I guess I'm still new to this.
No, I mean anything from a Citation jet
Right.
to a King Air, etc.
Mhm.
Just hearing that engine spool up is pretty cool.
What's your best advice for someone considering a career in aviation?
Definitely explore it and get a mentor because what you see out there is not the only opportunities that exist. I first started flying, thought I was going to become an airline pilot, and I get the chance to fly airplanes on a regular basis, but I'm doing something totally different than what I originally thought that I was going to be doing. So keep your eyes open. listen with your ears and find a mentor to help guide you through whatever career segment of the career that you find interesting.
Awesome. Now for like your landing playlist, what song would you have playing every time you come in and absolutely butter a landing?
So, in terms of landing, I don't really have a specific song, but I will embarrass myself with this one thing. When I was flying aerobatics practicing, I did have a practice in an air show list.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to be aging myself, and this was still kind of old for me even when I was doing this, but I have to admit, Creed and Nelly were on my go-to aerobatic practice list. Ride with Me by Nelly and Higher by
Ride with Me's a good one.
Creed.
The Creed song is hot too, but the Ride with Me, I can feel that one. I can feel the energy of
it,
that song because that's the
it
time that
got
I
me in
was a
the zone.
teenager. Right,
It
right.
got me in the zone when I was getting ready to like go up there and fly some hardcore aerobatics. It definitely helped set the mood. And then, yeah, there was a full list of a couple other songs on there too, but the rest of them are even more embarrassing than those two.
Hey, whatever gets you in your zone to fly something so challenging and technically safely,
Yes, exactly.
you've got to be dialed in. So whatever that is, if that's classical music, if that is, the sound of water dropping or babies crying, whatever it is, get in your zone.
Yeah.
Last one. What is your favorite aviation related acronym?
Honestly, um, I don't think I have a favorite acronym per se. I mean, we all know the tomato flames and all the rest of them out there, but I don't have a favorite acronym. But my favorite thing would probably be "See ya" on the radio.
All right, that'll work.
Ends the journey. You're traveling to a new destination, so it's one way that you're ending one chapter and then starting a new
Yeah.
chapter into a new airspace. So it's not an acronym, but it is my favorite thing to hear when I'm flying.
It's always interesting, when you're flying a long cross country, the amount of times that you end up being transferred to different controllers. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I've been doing a lot of this flight,
Yeah.
especially in bigger, busier airspaces where they break up the
Yeah.
distance even more. So that's
Yeah.
been really unique. What's been like the biggest like oh shit moment of your career?
Uh, I've had a couple. Nothing, fortunately, that made me land off of an airport.
Okay.
Nothing. Sorry, my battery's dying, but nothing that made me land off of an airport. I've had a couple engine fires actually on a couple multi-engine airplanes. Um, I've had some minor things like inspection panels pop on the Christian Eagle pop off, and you literally see a hole inside of your top wing that have been a little bit scary. I've had some electrical system malfunctions, things along those lines. But the coolest thing, as we mentioned earlier, flight training is key. Stay proficient on flying and your emergency procedures. And when those things happen, you flow into your training and you get the airplane down on the ground as quickly as you possibly can.
Right. As quickly and safely, your checklist. Checklist, checklist, checklist.
Yes, 100%.
You've flown every type of different aircraft. You've flown air shows. Please stress the importance of checklists in all of those different types of flying you have done.
And no matter what segment of the aviation that I'm doing, whether it is flying air shows, whether it's flying corporate jets, whether it's flying even something as simple as like a Cirrus SR-22 that you get a couple of thousand hours in, utilizing a checklist for every segment of each phase of flight is something that I still do every single time. Because when you don't do it, that's how pilots become complacent, and that's how accidents happen.
The checklists aren't there because you're incompetent. They're there to keep you proficient and just to say, hey, it's easy to overlook something and skip something. If you go through these
100%.
line items, you won't miss anything. Just go through
Yep.
them, breeze through them, verify, and keep it moving. The safer you are, the better aviation is for all of the rest of us.
Yep.
Every time a plane goes down, I get texts and calls from friends and family, no matter where the plane is. You know what I mean? And because they're like,
Yeah.
hey, that in theory, they know it's not me, but they're like, in theory, that could be you.
It
I
could be
want you to
you.
be safe. So if
100%.
you're gonna partake on this, do everything you can to be safe and to ensure the people that I love you that you are safe. A plane crashed at my airport on a day that I was flying. I had already landed. He and I were in the pattern at the same time. I landed, ended my flight. On the way home, my phone's blowing up. Friends are calling, hey, there was a crash at your airport. Are you okay? Is it you? I was like, oh no, I had no idea. I was already, at home. And they're like, oh no,
Yeah.
somebody went down. I look on the news and boom, it was the person I was in the pattern with. He used to fly. He flew like 3 or 4 times a week. 65-year-old guy in a little experimental, I think it was an RV7, laps in the pattern.
Did
That's
he
all he
make
would do
it?
every. No, it was shortly after, takeoff on a touch and go below 500 feet. I think the engine sputtered but didn't stall yet, and he didn't immediately turn around. I think he tried to continue climbing, and then the engine did die. He tried to then turn without power. Stall turns into a spin below 500 feet. There's not much you can do. So definitely, terrible incident. Um, but it comes back down to like your checklist, right? Like when you're flying, you have to talk to yourself before and about it before you take off. Hey, below 500 feet, I have an engine failure. Where am I going? What am I doing? I've decided this now because below 500 feet, I'm going to be on the ground in just a few seconds. So I need to have this destination chosen. So if it happens, boom, I'm just going right there and landing.
Using your checklist and going through emergency procedures and proficiency training is key to making sure that you stay safe. So I like your mentality and your attitude of how you're flying, and I hope more people continue to adopt that mentality of utilizing checklists and staying proficient while they're flying and practicing the emergency procedures as often as they possibly can, for we can keep all of these accident rates trending in the right direction. That way it looks good for the entire industry and to mainstream America.
I 100%. It's not about Monday morning quarterbacking. We're not trying to point the faults of others, but a lot of these things can be avoidable. So the purpose is to learn from the mistakes of others so you don't also make them.
Absolutely.
Well, Jamail, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Um, before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can follow you and hear more about your story and get more information?
Jamail Larkins on social media. Please check in and stay in touch because we drop weekly content for everything about aviation career opportunities, as well as scholarships, as well as information on the tour. So if you're in any of the cities that we're going to this year, would love to see you in person and talk a little bit more about airplanes.
Most definitely. And as we land the plane and finally let you guys go, thank you for tuning in. This has been an insightful and inspirational episode. Also talking about how some of you folks can help get aid in funding your aviation careers and journeys. Again, Jamail, thank you. I'm your host, O. May there always be wind beneath your wings. Peace.